What I'm going to do here is kind of present a review of Harari's book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what I see some of the critics are talking about, because they seem to criticize Harari for not providing them with a cookbook of how to solve the situation over the next 50 years and what decisions we should be making. Instead, Harari focuses on what we should focus on. So it's a blueprint and not a roadmap. So then it'll give us some quick fixes that we might want to start and look at in the right now in the year 2017, and it'll also then extend some idea as to what the complex dynamic process systems are going to be necessary in order to address the future in 2050 and above. And along with that, what he did in the book, which I thought was really neat, is he provided us with three basic scorecard criteria that we can match against every one of our plans. So one is like reduce suffering or brutality, to advantage objective reality, and the third one that he focuses on is to welcome disruptive technologies. And so if you think about those three, and you'll see where we get into those later as to how we marry them against the items that Harari talks about. But then when Harari says, he talks about these lessons, and when you look up lessons, you see lesson is something where learning is intended to occur. And Harari says what his goal was to stimulate further thinking, help readers participate in major conversations of our time. So the focus is on learning. And so the idea is to learn about current technology challenges. And so what he did is he started with the idea of disillusionment, because disillusionment is a very powerful force. And what he's saying is that the liberal package of democracy, capitalism, and humanism that we really thought was the end of history has really not produced a happy world and has not produced happy people. It hasn't delivered on its promise. And now if he talks about people like Fukuyama, who talk about the end of history, where he talks about how democracies have risen significantly in 25 years. And Fukuyama talks about how basically what he thinks the problem is that the problem is in the implementation of our liberal package. But the challenge that Harari brings to the table is that, these things are all based upon some really foundation principles of free will, and that the individual knows what's best for the individual. And he says, and both of these are really gone. Science has kind of taken away the idea of free will, and what we've seen is that technology can make better decisions for what's best for us. So Harari's position is that he's really moving from a policy problem to a values problem, so that the Fukuyama's position is wrong. And he talks about, he goes into three major areas like work, liberty, and equality in his first section. And what he says is that work, liberty, and equality are all based upon and held up by our liberal package. And the liberal package is now gone. So the question becomes, what's going to replace humanism? What's going to replace democracy? What's going to replace capitalism? These are some major questions that we're going to be looking at and we're going to be seeing over the period of the next 100 years. And so those are areas that he believes belong out there. We're not addressing those in this particular book. I think that's what he felt like he addressed in Homo Deus. What he wants now is, what are some of the quick fixes that we can look at? And I think he's done a wonderful job. I'll give you just some of the ones that I picked up. He picked that we should uncouple income from work. He talked about universal basic income and universal basic services. He said we should build new stories based on more rational species, so that our myths and our artifacts should be based upon that. We should get information and biotech into our news stories. We should start to develop a human-AI cooperation. We should make the rise of the useless class optional, not something and we should regulate the ownership of data to individuals. I mean, these are just 6 of the items that I picked up. And when I read just the first section, I mean, that is my worksheet of all the different things that I felt he touched on that are areas that we can start to work on. Then when he gets into the second part where he talks about the political challenges, I found 4 major, although there are many in there too, but the 4 major ones that I found is, one is to determine how our online social networks can help build human communities. Then he said, let's come up with techniques to integrate our physical bodies with the digital world. All right. These are very challenging things that we should be looking at. Start to develop new stories that demonstrate that we are one single global civilization. And the last thing is to prepare for the catastrophes associated with climate change, no jobs, upgraded humans, and long life. I mean, these are areas that he thinks that we should be looking at right now. And then he gets into more when he gets into the despair and hope. He gets into issues along the same lines. And so what I'm saying is you have to read the book, and you have to really read the book and read what he's saying. And you can't just give this a cursory read and say, oh, he didn't give us any, he didn't lay out any solutions. I think the major issue that he's talking about is that the liberal package is sinking. It's no longer holding up. And so he says, let's take some quick fixes that he gives us, and let's say that there's 100 of them in the book, and some things that we may want to look at even further out. Let's take those scorecard items and let's look at each of these and see how they fit within, do they reduce suffering or brutality? Does a quick fix advantage objective reality? Does it welcome disruptive technologies? If it does, then let's jump on it and let's try and get that quick fix, something that becomes part of our myths, part of our stories, and part of what we do as a species. And that's what I see that he's doing. I mean, he's given us a whole slew of different potential solutions. Now, when I looked at other critics about the book, I found that the influence of those critics, I found that their own prejudice so colored their perception of the book that their statements are really more validations of their prejudice and not really informative of the book that's being critiqued. Helen Lewis with her emphasis on feminism, Kellum with his emphasis on the AI special. He's an AI specialist, so he only liked the first section of the book. Moses wants predictions, and James Snell and Bill Gates both want Harari to solve the problems. And so the fact that Harari points out the cracks in a bridge, they think that they treat it like that's irrelevant if he doesn't also tell them how to fix them. But yet they all did say it was a good read. Thank you.